We forget that the Lord, from the first moment of his time spent on earth, was aware of what was ahead, and therefore it was not just the passion that was his passion, but all his life. He undertook willingly the maximum of pain on every level that a human being can take, and more. Indeed, some of the experts think that when at that last point, his sharing of our time, when he said, "Why have you abandoned me?" he also took on himself something of the curse of the absence of beatific vision, because the theologians maintain that he had the beatific vision in virtue of the hypostatic union, but he may have wanted to have that withdrawn so that he could, as it were, take on himself the fullness of the curse of separation. At that point he is able also to say, "It is accomplished." And the veil of the temple is to be torn in two, from top to bottom. Therefore the whole of the pedagogy of the Old Testament at that point becoming only obsolete and a sign. We therefore are living in the fullness of revelation and of time, something not to be taken lightly when we just look over our shoulder and think of a few kilometres behind here, New Grange, where Irish people tried to fumble in the dark and have some insurance policy against it. The dark. Life was short when New Grange was set up. The innings would have been perhaps 30 or 40 years, and therefore the dark was very present even in the light of day. And as in other cultures, such as Egypt, they built something bigger than themselves and actually very perfect, considering the means that they had. It reminds us that they were ants going into something cosmic, not knowing fully where they were going. That is the key. We are human ants going somewhere with the use of the same gift of time while we have it in our hands. It is very sad to look around and to see the high proportion even of young people who are opting out and not wanting more time, choosing to go quickly into the end, which is only, unfortunately for them, perhaps the painful beginning. We don't know, but it's not the best way. And we think also of the many people who, even from one ear to the next, just like that, go quite unprepared and in a state of shock into collision with the beyond, completely unthought of and unanticipated and unprepared. A huge victory precisely for the one who wants us to be distracted. I was just, while ironing yesterday, listening to a very powerful recording of a speaker, I presume a priest, but a very good one, an American one, who was showing something in the manner of C.S. Lewis in a modern version of the Screwtape Letters, how the enemy of the soul is very, very good at his game. And his great trick in our society is to make sure that they're not reflecting, that they're not in touch. Look around you, even around you, your day. Once you are in a public place, or indeed if you're not careful even at home, you are exposed to something which is going to take your thought. Just yesterday I had to go into the credit union, and I had noticed there how progressively from pure silence they've gone into louder and more aggressive music. Now it's got to such a pitch that it's completely invasive, and it doesn't happen just overnight, it's a bit at a time until you get into a mode where you only have something which is so loud that you are not able to think. It's It's not the best way to spend a working day, and a high proportion of people in the Western world are under those conditions of work. They can't think. And if they do think, they have to think the thoughts of others. In the news break, they have to get all the clutter that's coming from a badly filtered news medium, because RTE, notice, is a very powerful mouthpiece for the underworld, transmitting subtly and continually a certain type of message. And if you listen to what people are saying, they're all more or less repeating it. If you erode sufficiently, it has its effect. Now, what I am saying is this, my friends. Just think of the state of a soul who therefore goes according to that norm through the game of time. Now, we're not talking about one or two, but we can presume that we're talking about the vast majority of human souls in the Western world right now, dying almost as beasts as regards the care they have given to their interior life, which is what they find for the first time when there's no more distraction. Now, all of you, I presume, have access to internet. You can find a lot of material on this question of what happens even on the scientific level when death occurs, because of the quite large number of experiences of people who now actually return, but they all have a similar story. Now, the difference is this, that those who have only a short time of clinical death have only the initial stage of departure, which seems blissful. Why? There's no more pain. Therefore, the immediate feeling is that of release. But it doesn't stop there. And those who have a long one find other things starting to happen. And that's when it becomes not quite so peaceful quite often. There are a lot of NDE experiences there on YouTube, very unequal, but all clear in this, that there's no question whatsoever of a diminution of existence and essence. On the contrary, there's a great increase, a total increase of awareness, because there's no distraction. The soul is with itself, and it's carrying itself, and it has no more power. It has to be led, and it goes in the direction of its weight. Do you see how terrible that is for a soul that has been, for all its existence, counterweighed, not weighed towards light and grace, but in a mode of negativity? We call it in moral theology the fundamental option. When a soul reaches that point of no, and there are, let's face it, people who are going around emitting blasphemy, curses and everything against the light, even human light. It's not the best way to flicker out into the beyond and face it for the first time. Now, therefore, this battle which we see taking place in the person of our Lord, the light itself, is present in every human soul, because it's a continuous and cosmic battle between yes and no, light and darkness, and it is all being decided sometimes in one point of time, the last pull of grace. Just the other day, it was Tuesday, I was going down to the Athai area because they call me to give a retreat down there sometimes in a lovely little centre of prayer, and the people who came to fetch me looked around in the kitchen and saw our venerable brethren the Beatles beating time in the clock there in the background, and they were chuffed about this in such a holy place. But one of them chirped in, well, actually he's not lost. Apparently in Maria Simba, John Lennon didn't go down, and we were very consoled to hear that. Maybe, and this is what the person said, the other person, that person hinted that maybe just a fraction after that strange and terrible death that he had, you know what he said, don't you? When he had this gun against his head, go on, do it. That was John Lennon's last word on this side of time. Go on, do it. And he did. And he blew his brains into the beyond. But it would seem that perhaps, we don't know, But the divine judge, knowing all the, nevertheless, joy that he'd given to millions of people across the world, wanted to give him one last huge push, perhaps just one fraction of a second, we don't know, after that bullet hit his head, when there was still some sort of life in him. He maybe have said yes to the grace that he was starting to see, and perhaps in that it was enough for him just to get out of the other place. Now, we don't know how it works, but I have great faith in Maria Simba, so if she said that he didn't go down, it's a great blessing. I'd be glad to hear it. But I wonder what his thoughts were when he got to the other side. Because nevertheless, one presumes they had not done all that much praying for many years. They probably see things instantly in a different light with regard to glory and bliss. Actually, some years later, when George Harrison was dying of cancer, they interviewed him not long before he died. It's on YouTube, and they asked him something on this, and he, very interestingly, they call him the Quiet Beetle, said something to this effect: bliss is of a different order. And he knew what he was talking about with regard to glory. In the early 20s, they were world famous already, but he was seeing things, having experienced their form of strange meditation in Eastern cultures, but nevertheless things which did perhaps make them pause. And George, being the Quiet Beetle, had actually thought a lot about the things that mattered when he was coming close to his end and knew it. Things change when one is getting to that point. It's a great blessing sometimes to have cancer rather than an accident. Remember that. Puts the brakes on. Now, therefore, when it comes to time, and by the way, Holy Week is a retreat for the whole church, a time quietly to pause a bit and to step by step go through the Passion of our Lord. Think also of your past Easters, because one does relive the graces of past retreats, e.g. Holy Thursday, before the Blessed Sacrament. Great graces come and vocations are often born. Pause there with the Lord and hear him suffering, that atrocious pain he saw when he cried out, sweating blood. Not my will, but thine be done. Now, when therefore we pause, we do readjust the gift of time somewhat. Otherwise we too can be rushing, doing all kinds of wonderful things, yes, but rushing, doing sometimes too many wonderful things, and not feeling, not touching, not loving, not gazing, falling into precisely the excess of Martha, when perhaps the Lord only wanted that Mary in us to be at his feet and gaze at him and let him work and speak and minister. Now, I'm saying something important, my friends, because it's an illness even in pious souls, holy activism, buzzing from morning till night and night until morning, unable to stop fidgeting for the Lord. There are times when time is of greater value when we do less. Remember that. Now let us then, in that context, remember that perhaps we were closer to the Lord even earlier in our life. Why? In early life there is a great yes, there is a great fervour in youth, a great vibrance of soul. And you know, as Wordsworth said, he fades into the light of common day. Man gets used to things and doesn't take things quite so seriously. It can be the tragedy of each of us that we get used to mediocrity, to a certain mode of functioning. Easter is a time to again ask, am I going down, or am I at least staying put? I'll just finish with one thing. That, by the way, can help us to relive past moments of intimacy with Jesus, e.g., to go back to a tabernacle where we heard and felt him, to go back to a memory where he met us and we said yes, to revivify that flame, because sometimes yesterday can speak again, even on the page, even in a place, even in the calmness of our memory with closed eyes, reigniting the flame of a past yesterday. Because sometimes, my friends, time was only precious when we had it, and we didn't realize how precious it was until it was gone. Many of us perhaps in this life, and perhaps even in the next, will say, yesterday, all my troubles seemed so far away. Now they look as though they're here to stay.